and totally morbid, but maybe in an awesome way. Extremity. A troubled young woman goes to an extreme haunt in order to deal with her troubled past, and things get really crazy from there. That's the plot, and that's what I'm reviewing today. So overall, I think this movie was ambitious. It aimed to do a lot, and I think it actually accomplished a good amount of what it aimed to do, and even perhaps it was a social commentary on this new phenomenon that's been going on of these extreme haunted house places that people go to. And I'll get into why that is in a moment. So first and foremost, you would probably need to know what an extreme haunt is in order to fully grasp how intense this plot line is, and also that this is a very real thing in real life, right? So extreme haunts are basically regular haunted houses, but on acid, maybe cocaine. If you've ever gone to a haunted house before, right, it's like a walk-through maze type thing where, it's dark, there's lights flashing, there's fake, Muppet type things that look really gooey or whatever. And then occasionally maybe, one of the fright people like jump out at you. They never touch you. You're not allowed to touch them. And they jump out at you from a distance, and you may jump because it's a jump scare, right? It's a straight up jump scare. Now, an extreme haunt is basically now these people can touch you. You can get dragged somewhere. You can have like water, all types of stuff thrown at you, maybe other liquids, all types of things. And it's really extreme, right? It puts people, it's not even sometimes like, to me, from the research I've done, it's not even necessarily sometimes like supernatural stuff. Sometimes it's like, someone trying to rape you or something. Not like really rape you, but like the maybe looking like they might, or like rob you or point a gun in your face and stuff. Like just stuff where it's like, just live in the city. Why do you need to live in the city and go out at like 2 a.m.? Why do you need to like pay? So now you already know that I'm slightly biased going into this, because I'm already just like, how are they going to justify me wanting to sit there for like an hour and a half watching someone who voluntarily went through an extreme haunt? So let's see if they actually convinced me. Okay, so the movie had some pros, and it did have a few cons, but I want to focus on the pros first and foremost, because there's one major pro that I think actually makes it so this film is something people should see. The first pro is the imagery. It's funny because I thought since this is going to be extreme haunt, and sometimes sometimes you wonder if, because extreme haunts, like I said, are so like, guns could be pointed in your face. People are like dragging you stuff. It's not necessarily supernatural horror. It's more like, grindhouse, really raw stuff where it can, I was afraid that it may go to be kind of, too raw, too, not necessarily good cinematography, because maybe they were going to try to be really like rugged and like raw with it, and that actually was not the case. I was pleasantly surprised that there were so many. It actually had some fantasy looks to it, because what you're going through, there's so many, and I'll get into it in a moment. There's different plot lines going on and things of that nature, and in some moments you're looking at flashbacks, and they kind of play out dreamlike almost. And there was some great cinematography in this film, like just the way that the characters were set up in scenes where I was like, wow, this is actually nice to look at. Like they're not just focusing on the horror or the gore or maybe some jump scares, but they're actually setting this up to look a certain way, to draw you in, to build this sort of atmosphere. So I think the imagery was really great in this film. The acting was on point as well. Like I said, when you're going to something, especially if you have some biased viewers who may be thinking, why would I want to watch somebody who would want to go through this? Are they going to make them extreme? Are they going to make them likable? Are they going to make it so they're not relatable at all? And that was actually, once again, not the case. The characters, there were a variety of characters. One character in particular, which was the lead woman, which I'll get into a little bit more with her in a second, she was great. And then all the actors around this character really worked well to create an atmosphere. Like, they weren't And there were like gray areas, and the actors played it up in that sense of, no one's necessarily a cookie cutter horror movie trope, because you can have that sometimes, right? And those tropes aren't necessarily bad, but in this case, I think they went out of their way, and it made sense, and it worked to not fall into the classic tropes, horror tropes of characters. Not with the main girl, not with the side characters, not with the so-called foe and things of that nature. They kind of blurred the lines a little bit, and I think it really worked for this film, and the actors did a great job with that. Another pro was, like I said, there were strong women characters, not just with the main girl, but with her supporting characters around her. Like, the women definitely played it up in this film, and this was another thing where you're kind of worried, whereas these films that kind of are highlighting what can be a very brutal topic, depending, how you view and what kind of extreme haunt it could be. And, it can be exploitative, right? You can have these times where you have films where, there's a woman lead character, but that doesn't mean anything, because a lot of time it's just she's the one that gets it the worst a lot of the times, even if she doesn't die. And you kind of wonder whose gaze is that film for. And I think in this particular film, it was done in a sense that it wasn't just maybe the default of the male gaze for this film, but for all types of viewers to watch this, to see the character not just in a sexual way, not any of the women in just a sexual way. Yes, there was some sensual moments. Yes, there were some sexualized moments, but it wasn't done. I feel like it wasn't done in such a way that was gratuitous. Which brings me to the horror and gore. There was definitely gore in this film. It did get gory. But the pro that I have for it is that it wasn't like gory for the sake of, we don't really have a plot line. Here's someone getting their head bashed in instead. Like, it wasn't like they sacrificed the plot and the narrative to just be torture porn, right? It was like there were moments that were gory, that were violent, but it made sense for the characters and it made sense for the plot. So, yay. And my major pro with this film was, to me, the messaging that it put forth. And I'm not saying messaging like it was trying to tell you something, like it was a movie on a soapbox, but I think it can spark a conversation of what is horror to people? What constitutes as good horror? What constitutes as a safe extreme haunt? What is the purpose of extreme haunts, right? And it doesn't really give you an answer, but I think this film puts it in a context of, who are horror fans, right? Because the main character sought out this place, and it talks about her psyche. It talks about where she was in her life, why she was drawn to this kind of subgenre of horror, of brutality, and things of that nature. And it puts that forward in a way where it's like, is it therapeutic? Does it help? Or can it hinder more? And I think it was the same thing with the extreme haunts. Like, is this therapeutic? Is it good that she chose to do this? Or did this just mess her up even more? Or did it finally let her be free? Or did it do worse damage? Things of that nature, without getting, spoilery. And I think that's really cool because, it doesn't have, movies, horror films, no film has to be like on a soapbox. But when you can find little themes in those pictures that can make you think a little bit about it after the credits roll, then I think that's a plus. Okay, so this movie was not perfect, because no movie is. So let's get into the cons. One of the cons of the film was there were a lot of narratives going on, and all of them, and I don't mind when there's a lot of narratives sometimes, but it felt almost like things were started and then they weren't fleshed out. Now, the main plot line was solid for the most part, but then there were these other sideline plots that were kind of felt a little thrown in, and they also felt like, what happened? Towards the end, we just never found out. Okay, cool. So it was like, once again, like I said, this film was ambitious. It tried to do a lot, and I think it succeeded in most of it, but then there were times, like with certain narratives, certain characters, where it was like, it would have been nice to follow up to see what happened. It would have been nice to maybe not have that, so now I'm not wondering what happened. So there were a lot of narratives, and not all of them were fleshed out. The second one, and I think this is a little bit more major than narratives, is that there were a couple of plot holes there. There were, not like a lot, but there were like one or two where I was like, how did that person get there? Are they going to explain how, where, what? And then there was one plot hole where something was revealed And it was definitely a reveal, but then I don't think it was completely clear. And maybe that was just my bad. Maybe that was a moment when I looked away or something. But I also think if it's, with narrative and writing, that even if a viewer does look away, if that's supposed to be something major, you have to make it so there's no reason for anybody to be confused, right? If you want it to land right. So I think one or two plot holes made it so certain things left you so it didn't land as well as it could have. So that was definitely a con for me. So, with that said, is this film Stab approved? Yes. This movie is definitely Stab approved. I really enjoyed it. I kind of went into it. I went into it with an open mind because I was like, what is this going to say about extreme haunts? It actually pushed me to find out more about extreme haunts. And I'm even more convinced that I would never want to go into any of them. But I did not mind watching a movie about a young girl who did. And I just really, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good time. I don't know if I'd classify it as fun. But it definitely was an experience. And I'm not saying it wasn't fun, like that's a negative, but like just the topic, just the characters, what people were going through. It feels kind of bad to say I was having fun. More so, I was just definitely enjoying the experience of the film itself. So it is definitely Stab approved. Okay, so did you watch Extremity, or have you any kind of recommendation for haunted house films that you want me to check out? Comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. And also, be sure to subscribe so that you are the first to know when I post my videos of all things horror. Thanks for watching. Let's get creepy together.